Oh, we're live. Hi, David. Welcome to Winter with Grace.
Thanks, Grace. Good to be here.
I can't believe I'm chatting with you because, I feel like you're such an icon in the tech ecosystem.
Well, I sort of feel like you are the icon online doing
Oh
all this
God.
cool reporting and
Oh God.
podcasts.
This gives
I've been
me
listening to your podcast for a while. It's pretty cool to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to chat with you. But before we start the show, I gotta give a quick shout out to our sponsor. So this episode is brought to you by LG Nova. Get ready to ignite your passion for innovation at the fourth annual InnoFest, happening at the iconic Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco on September 25th and 26th. This two-day event brought to you by LG Nova is your chance to dive into the future with industry leaders and cutting-edge startups shaping health tech, AI, clean tech, life science, smart life, mobility, and more. And here's something extra special. I'll be hosting a panel at InnoFest guiding a dynamic discussion on the future of AI and the workforce. Join me along with other thought leaders as we explore the trends and technologies driving innovation and positive change. Don't miss out on this unique opportunity to be part of the conversation and help create a brighter, more innovative tomorrow. Register today at innofest.alginova.com and be part of the movement at InnoFest 2024. Okay, so Dave, officially welcome to the show again.
Thank you. You're good at that.
Oh
Nice to
God. Uh I feel like I want to start off the show with I feel like what I thought were really interesting or really impressive about your story is Techstar was originally started in Boulder, Colorado. And I kind of feel like, coming from being a person living in Silicon Valley, I think starting anything in Silicon Valley is already really hard. And why don't we start with maybe some of the early on journey that you have prior to Techstar that kind of shape you into um, creating the platform? And also I have so many questions on how you grew this organization into something that's global.
Cool. Yeah. No, thanks. My history and my background is I learned programming when I was a little kid, right? Apple IIe, and I fell in love with the ability to create software and have it do cool stuff like games or whatever. And then I went to school to learn computer science, so how to be a programmer. And that was my first epic of my career, was just being a programmer, right? And I enjoyed it because you're creating something that lots of people can use, right? And can be used for a long time. And it always felt to me like art, like creating something from nothing.
Mhm.
And I love that. And it turns out startups are that too, right? So created some software, for fun, and then went to school to learn how to do it more professionally, and got a job. I've had one job interview in my life, but I got that job out of college, right? So I'm 1-0. I'm undefeated, Grace, on job interviews. Never had one that didn't work. Got as a programmer, and turns out we were building software systems for ambulance dispatch,
Mhm.
to have an ambulance get from here to there, and take a patient to the hospital, and drop people off at dialysis treatments, things like that. And that was a cool job, but it was really being done as like a service. And I had a coworker named David Brown, and a college roommate named Bob Durkin, that we decided we were going to create a software company to do something similar. Like, we thought it was kind of broken, like dispatching ambulances as a service. It could be a lot better if you had some really cool, great software to do it. So we built a software company called Pinpoint Technologies.
Mhm.
That was my first experience with entrepreneurship. I was the technical guy, one of the technical people creating the product. And
Mhm.
fast forward, that product's been used to dispatch 20 million ambulances. That's what I love about software, right? It can be used for a long time, affect a lot of people's lives. Started another company that didn't work, started another company that did work, like had an entrepreneurial career basically, and started angel investing. And really love the idea of angel investing, but my experience with it was a good way to turn a medium-sized fortune into a much smaller one, and that wasn't super satisfying. People were coming to me for money, and then I'd meet them in a coffee shop, say, "Great, like your idea," but then they wouldn't come back to me again until they needed more money, and so I didn't feel that involved. And I thought, gosh, angel investing, this is broken too. Maybe I should start a company to work on this. And that kind of led to the idea of Techstars.
Totally. Quickly saying hi to the audience. Hi, Michelle. I want to quickly touch on like, you're seeing like, the ecosystem was like also broken for the angel investors. I want to maybe like start with, can you give us like, since like you started Techstars like 17 years ago, or like maybe even like almost 18 years ago, what were the things that Techstar did differently versus like a lot of these like other um incubator wannabes, or like I feel like nowadays like whenever we think about Techstar, it's like literally one of like the top um programs for like entrepreneurs to like get accelerated, and then a lot of the Techstar managing directors in different places became kind of like fund managers themselves, and they're all like very successful. Can you quickly kind of like give us like the maybe call it like 3 different stages, as like when you first started as like the Techstar 1 in Boulder, Colorado, to like expanding it into like the Chicago, New York of the world, and then to right now like it's a global organization. Like I feel like I just seen so many companies, they're like, Techstar 18 or like Techstar 24 or something like everywhere. And like, give us like the overview of like, what the program it kind of like arrive at like today's day and age. So the audience can get more context.
Sure. Yeah. So it was late 2006 that we started, and the word accelerator hadn't been invented yet. My co-founder Brad Feld coined that term a couple years later to describe the activity. But really, as I said, it came from that dissatisfaction, the brokenness of angel investing, but also from wanting to make our startup community stronger. We love the idea of companies coming from anywhere in the world, and we're seeing more and more of that as a trend. So helping the next wave of startup communities be successful and using this model was a big part of the founding story. But really we just want to find a better way to do early stage investing where it was more satisfying. And I was the original managing director, ran that original program in Boulder. There's now 55 managing directors around the world. The 17-year journey is that today, we're funding, 500-600 companies a year. We're doing that in 16 countries and 50 plus different cities. And it's a very, very broad network of companies worth, well over $100 billion now in the portfolio. So it's come a long way, but back then it was based on those simple, ideas. And really the first phase of it was just that, like better way to invest, make the startup community better. Then we started to experience really significant pull from the market. That's probably the second epic of the journey, where we were doing this in a few places, Boulder and Boston. We kind of got pulled to Boston by some mentors that, wanted us to operate there. We got pulled to Seattle by, Andy Sack and Greg Cohen and others there. We were just in a few locations, but then the real pull began. We started to experience, communities around the world saying, we want you to be part of what we do here in our startup community, because we see that you're bringing mentors together and entrepreneurs together and giving this funding and this context for people to work together to make the community better, but also to do a good job as investors together. And so this sort of wave of not just physical cities, but also larger companies and governments coming at us, wanting us to be part of their community, that fueled a lot of the growth for a long time. And I guess this, maybe the most recent epic is really, we've really institutionalized what we do. We've got a process. We've got, large pools of capital that we deploy, and are now, sort of an investor, really, leveraging the model to help more and more founders succeed, and doing that in more and more places around the world. So it's been a wild ride, but it's totally the community that makes it work, right? We're only a few hundred people at Techstars, but the community around Techstars is a cast, an army of tens of thousands that give first, really, help the community, help everybody in it, expect nothing in return. And that is the true magic of what we do.
Totally. I feel like Techstar is kind of like your venture and accelerator startup, basically. So like I kind of have like my question around like the product creation, like the team building. So like when you're thinking about successful product, like I feel like you're kind of like a multi-sided product. Like, so the product side of things would be like the entrepreneur, it's like part of your customer. Maybe the VCs are part of your customer. And like, so can you maybe share a little bit more of like at the beginning, like what was the business model? And like I know
Yeah.
that like you guys would invest like a set of capital into a startup and then like getting a certain ownership, and through providing a lot of values like mentorship, like maybe these like different programs. I wonder when you first started, like in your area, like with like the Techstar Boulder, I guess like how many mentor do you have to have? And then like what is mentorship kind of like the shape looks like? Is that like a curriculum, like a quick like 3-month college of like me just be there, be like, okay, what is my first like product? Like go through this list or something? Like how does
Yeah.
that
Well,
like?
it's not quite so formulaic, right? The first thing I'd say is we're super clear about who the customer is. The customer is the founder, right? That comes to us and says, we want you to help us connect us to capital, to talent, to customers. Those are the three big things that our customers want from us. And we have a mechanism to do that through the accelerator. And sure, we work with lots of other investors. We have our own limited partners. We manage, well over $1 billion of LP capital. We have corporations we work with as partners. So we have lots of partners, but our customer is very clearly, the founder who's creating the company that we want to be a part of and help them support. So we're investors. That's what we do. And, in the early days, it was figuring out, how to take our little team and add value to these companies, right? And so the first thought we had was, let's be a mentorship driven program. Let's recognize, sure, I've done some stuff, and Brad Feld has done some stuff, and Jared Polis, my other co-founder, has done some stuff, and he's now our governor, and David Brown, my other co-founder, we've all done some stuff. But wouldn't it be more powerful to go out into the community and find all the entrepreneurs that have built the amazing companies we all know and love, and invite them to be part of the process of helping these founders succeed? And so we started off with 100 or so mentors who asked for nothing in return. Some of them invested in the program. Some of them invested in the follow-ons of the companies that came through the program. But that was all, them deciding to do it. And it's not so much a curriculum that we invented as talking to the founders and saying, what are we doing? Do we have the arrow pointed in the right direction? We're about to step on the gas, so let's make sure we're going the right way before we do that. And let's add network value to you. We've given you some capital. Now let's give you customers and talent. Let's help you build a board. Let's help accelerate you, before we even called it that, in the direction that you want to go. And as I said, eventually Brad coined the term accelerator, and that's now the thing that everyone uses that as a model. But we invented the mentorship-driven accelerator, and we had the first company that ever IPO'd out of any accelerator, and it just took off from there. So in the early days, it was really, as it is today, just about helping founders succeed, customizing what they get based on what they need and what they're doing.
Totally. I'm a small angel investor myself. Like I don't even, I feel cringe to say it in front of you. Obviously you have invested in a lot of things, but I wonder, like, in terms of like to quote unquote add value, or like helping the company grow, I feel like there's like kind of I don't even know what to do, or like I feel like a lot of times it's like, the founder asks you to introduce them to blah blah blah, and then you make an intro or something. Like how does that translate into like a larger scale, since you guys have like over 100 people in the mentorship program at the very beginning? Like if I'm a Techstar mentor, like what exactly would be the training for me to like do these things? And then I don't think like everyone's gonna in it for like the charity side of things. Like how do you kind of incentivize people to kind of create these like value for these companies that like some maybe they didn't invest in?
Yeah. So when we onboard, so we now have about 6,000 mentors, right? So it's grown, and they're in all these communities around the world. So we have geographic coverage, thematic coverage, and we organize the network that way. But early on, and even today, we created something that we use called the Mentor Manifesto, right? Which anybody could Google. It's sort of the social norms of being a mentor around the Techstars system. And so it talks about what's acceptable. It talks about how you should approach mentorship. It talks about the values of give first. And it is give first, right? So most mentors, most entrepreneurs who come back and mentor after they're successful, most of our partners, none of them really think of it as a charity. They do get something back.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we say it give first, not get never. You just don't know what you're going to get, right? You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know when you're going to get it. You don't know what form it's going to take, right? But something good is going to come back to you, whether that's the opportunity to invest in the next, unicorn, or that's the opportunity to, help your company by leveraging a technology, or maybe it's a job you're going to get. SendGrid was that company I mentioned, first ever accelerator company at IPO. I was on the board for a long time. Their CEO in the middle growth years came from the mentor pool that we had. The founders were still there and they were still engaged, but as they grew, they needed more. And that sort of thing happens a lot too. So they're incentivized by making their community stronger, by being around other great people they can learn from, not just the founders, but other mentors. They're incentivized by whatever their own personal goals are, be it, job or investing, right? But I think the common tie is they have a give first philosophy, and they want their startup community to be better and better because that helps everyone.
Totally. I wonder, I really like what you said about sometimes a mentor became just joining the startup himself. And then I wonder when it comes to when it comes to picking who is getting into the Techstar ecosystem, who is getting in as a founder. I'm sure a lot of founders are listening are trying to get into Techstar at one point. First of all, what's the criteria when you select them? And then the other part is I'm sorry, I'm famous for having these really bad habits to ask 4 questions in a row. By the way, hi Jeff. So anyway, so I wonder when it comes to when it's the creation when it's a selection criteria, the other part is how do you leverage the current ecosystems, since you guys are connected to all these top investors, I'm sure maybe leveraging their judgment to doing the due diligence is a part of the game. But do you feel the numbers game approach is what you're leaning towards too, since it's hard to predict who's gonna have become the breakout company? Or do you feel there should be a super sophisticated selection criteria to be okay, we think you have to check A, B, and C to go in?
It's a bit of both, right? I mean, I think in terms of selection, there's actually a lot more stages than people might expect. The first step is leveraging AI and machine learning, like we've seen so many companies. We can screen a lot and sort of focus our time using those technologies, but that's just the first level, right? That doesn't screen a lot.
I'm sorry to break at this part because I have a goldfish memory, and I wonder can you elaborate more of leveraging AI? Because I think a lot of people are thinking, oh, it's kind of if so-and-so left so-and-so let's say if you're a Tesla engineer and then in a stealth mode, and then we just hunt you down, or whoever changed the job title to stealth company on LinkedIn, and then you stalk them, or what does AI kind of mean for you?
It's pretty simple for us. We have a scoring system for the startups we look at, and we have human scorers. There's an investment committee that's at the last step in the process that I was going to describe, which is humans like me or our chief investment officer, or Brad, who I mentioned earlier, that bring, many decades of experience of picking companies. That's the last step. The first step is an AI scoring, right? We have a model that we've trained, and it says this is a 2.6 or this is a 9.4, right? And it's just its opinion, and we just view that as data. It's not the decision. It's a machine making a judgment about, who are the people, what are they working on, what's the market, how has their application been worded, comparing things to things that we've seen work. It's just a score. It's not the only thing we look at. It's a thing that we add to it. So we're leveraging it to be like another smart person in the room that might have a different opinion from us, right? And so we use it to make sure we're not missing something. We use it to help us screen kind of the 10% that are really just no, right? We don't want to spend our time on those where people have, not really given any answers, or we're not even sure this is a real company and it might be a joke. We want to screen those things out quickly. And so the AI helps us do that. We then have a local selection committee of people like local to the program who are taking that and another set of eyes. And they're going to be a lot of the mentors and domain experts. So we're leveraging our partners. We work with people like Johns Hopkins or, Cedars-Sinai in the healthcare space, for example, where we want to leverage their expertise. So we're getting lots of opinions. That's helping us whittle it down, narrow it down. The managing director who's in the market, right, is gathering data from people who've experienced these founders of this company. And eventually it gets to that last step, which is that investment committee, where we're applying our judgment to which are the best companies we have in front of us here. So there's a lot of steps to the process.
For sure. Quickly saying hi to the audience. Hi, Hasib. So I wonder, when it comes to I really like what you said about treating AI as a smart person in the room instead of just having it as the main thing. And then I feel like that's a really nice way to put it, to include AI in the mix. And I wonder, when it comes to you mentioned about the chief investment officer or you or the managing director of the world. So what does a managing director look like for each kind of ecosystem? And then how do they help select the company that could make it to the next step?
Well, those managing directors are really important. They're on the ground in the community, right? And so in all the places that we operate around the world, they are part of those communities, actively participating in everything going on there. And so typically they're a former, entrepreneur, angel investor. That's a typical profile. They've built some companies. They're often generalists. They have a lot of experience with a lot of different things. And, we're not a guru-driven model where, there's one person who says, this is how you should do something. We're a mentorship-driven model. And so a big part of their job is to be the camp counselor, right? They have some good general input for the companies. We only have 10 or 12 companies in a program. We don't have hundreds, right, at a time. And so each company is getting a lot of attention. And that person is then leveraging the network that we have across the world, the network of partners, the network of alumni, the network of mentors, and so on, right, to tailor what they're helping that company with. They don't have to have all the answers, but they have to be really good at activating the network and pointing that resource at the correct company at the correct time.
Totally. I really like what you said about keeping the program small, as each managing director maybe in charge of each batch is 10 to 12 people, 10 to 12 companies, to have the more intentional approach. I wonder, when it comes to leveraging the network, as you mentioned, what does that kind of look like for you? So I feel so is it more of for example, if I'm a founder and I send you a deck, and then maybe you could circle back some feedback from connecting to me to investor A and B and C, and then kind of getting a sense of what they're saying. But how does that kind of shape your decision on if I should be the 10 company that's in this batch, or will I be able to get full on funding from Techstars, or how does it kind of play out?
Yeah. So the selection process, again, local process to each program. So just make it easy. Pick an example. Take New York. Right? There'll be a managing director in New York that is going to see thousands of applications for 10 or 12 spots typically. Right. And so they're trying to pick the best 10 or 12 companies that they are the most excited about. They're leveraging the process that I just described to sort of pick the companies they want to work with. Once we pick them, they're in the program and we fund them, they're family, right? They're part of the network for life, right? So it's okay, great. We're investors in your company. We're part of the team. So they're starting to show us all the problems they have. They think of us more like a co-founder than an investor, and we're with them. We are in the trenches with them. This is a 90-day program where we are in the same place with them, typically, physically, right? And so their primary experience is going to be that managing director coaching them, the local mentor community, and then where needed, they're going to tap into the broader network. So, the local managing director is going to say, well, we need a lot more healthcare experience for you. Let's go import that and get you connected to that for customers, for talent, for more capital, et cetera. Right. And so again, very customized, but the experience, to your point, there's only 10 or 12 companies and you've got an army of people locally to help you and this big global network behind you, but you're not in a room with hundreds of people. Kind of like when you send your kids to school, right? Like, do you want a class of 200 people or a class of 10 or 12 where they're going to get more attention from the local community? It's trying to make every single one of those companies successful. It's trying to help them all get to the next stage. And again, it's customized for each company. But once they're in, we're investors and we're with them and we're just trying to help them.
Totally. I really like the metaphor of like sending kids to school. As a mom of like 1-year-old, I feel like I constantly think about like these like decisions. Jumping back to like what we're talking about, like the local community and getting like introduce them to like, for example, like a subsector of like experts, like you mentioned healthcare or like other investors. I wonder like so after, let's say you connect a startup to, I mean, I guess like I want to double click on like the selection process of the 10 company or 12 company from Techstars, right? So like I know that it's like maybe each managing director have like a different like way of selecting, or maybe is there like a playbook for everybody so that it's like a standardized globally instead of a person by person judgment process?
Yeah, I mean, there is actually a playbook, and it's a big document you can throw on the table. That's not it behind me, if you're wondering. But it is something we've developed over a long period of time. And I although it's not so rigid that there's not local feel, right? It does work differently, in Berlin than it does in LA, right? And because the community is different, and they have their own strengths and weaknesses. So we want, that local flavor, and we want to, sort of allow the local organizations, the local accelerators, the local managing directors to pick things that they're excited about, because that's part of the magic, right? Like, it's not that we're going to say they all have to be this type of company or make it so rigid. It's not like McDonald's where they're going to tell you what temperature to cook the French fries, how to sprinkle salt on, exactly this amount, so it tastes exactly this way. It's like, this is what we've learned. This is the best practice. People try things, they experiment with things. That's part of the beauty of network. We have massive network effects, being all over the world, learning things, dealing with so many different entrepreneurs, so many different cultures, communities, mentors around the world, that we can make ourselves better if we experiment and listen and learn, right? And share that across the system. So it's all one organization, but we're a network-driven organization.
Totally. I like what you said about like it's not French fries, but like it's like not like there's no playbook for like a set playbook. But what would be the main characteristic that you feel like it's like kind of the same thing for every location? So
Yeah.
obviously there would be I assume there would be like the market size, like the talent, like quality, but like what exactly would be the standard for like the
Yeah.
talent quality? Like how do you screen tenacious on the resume?
Yeah. I mean, look, it's the same amount of money. It's the same offer. We do a standard offer, standard amount of ownership. So it is the same thing. It's got the same management structure, the same team. We're the same investment committee. So we look at every single deal before it's funded anywhere in the world. Right. And so it is a system, but there is local flavor to that system. What, generically we talk about is when we're screening entrepreneurs and looking at companies, right? We look at 6 things in a very specific order, right? Team, market, progress, idea, in that order. So team is so important. You have to say it 3 times, right? Like that's the main thing you're looking at. Who is this team? What is their intrinsic motivation? What do they want to change in the world? Do they have the permission to do it? Do they have the skills to do it? It's so much about the team in the early stage. That's really our bet, that we're picking a great group of people that are going to make great founders. They're going to build something that changes the world, right? And then we look at market. What market are they in? Is it a big market? Is it changing? If it's changing, that's great. If it's shrinking, great. There's dynamics in the market. If it's static, hasn't changed in 20 years, probably not as great of an opportunity. Somebody would have done something there. Progress is the fifth one. We believe that great founders actually do stuff. They don't wait to do stuff. They just do stuff. You put a brick wall in front of them and they run through it, right? They have to teach themselves how to code, so they teach themselves how to code. They don't wait for funding. They do stuff. They go get customers. So we like to see progress. And then ideas, the last thing, like it's kind of bonus points. There aren't that many new ideas. It's really about the execution. But we put it last so that we can talk about it being last. You have permission when you start Techstars to change your idea. No problem. We're behind you and the team. That's the more important thing. And you're probably going to stay in the same general market because that's what you love. But the ideas are going to change for sure and almost always do. So we give them permission to change those ideas.
For sure. Hi, Rami. We have more audience comments here. And I wonder when it comes to I really like what you said about team. And I wonder the market and then idea and other things. So I wonder when it comes to different trends, so since right now we're in a major wave of AI, how do you kind of react to these trends? I'm sure you're those 55 managing directors are, I'm sure everybody have invested in some AI companies in the past, but how do you kind of react to a major trend right now? Since I feel chatting with a lot of LPs, people like to back funds that can invest in a company that's later on be picked by a top funds or something. And I feel maybe that's a major benchmark for a lot of individual investors, but how do a organization and platform like Techstars react to these major trends and also the investor reaction to the trends too?
As you can see, I've been doing this for a while as an investor and got a few gray hairs from that activity. I've seen a few mega trends. I was around, in the early years of my career, but when the internet really hit, it used to be AOL and modems dialing up, and I saw that obvious mega trend. I saw the mobile wave, right? And it to me is very similar to the AI wave, where it is clearly foundational. It is clearly going to separate, bifurcate the people who use it from the people who don't. I remember Matt Mullenweg mentoring at Techstars one day, and he said, he's the founder of WordPress, many other things. He said, the future is divided into two. I'll never forget when he's talking to the group. He said, people who can script and people who can't. Right? People who can script are going to change the world. People who can't are going to hire or work with the people who can. I think AI is sort of like mobile and sort of like the internet. It's not a vertical. It's not a thing that, is going to define a category. It is foundational. So in the same way that today, you wouldn't think of mobile as a vertical, you would think about it as part of everything. I think that's how we need to think about AI. It's just part of everything. Either you're leveraging it or you're dead, right? In the future. So same with the internet, right? You're doing software or you're building a company, but you're not on the internet. How does that work? It's unthinkable. I think the same thing is happening to us with AI, where every company is an AI company. Every company will leverage it in some way, whether that's helping them write copy for ads or, on the other end of the spectrum, foundational AI technologies. We're seeing massive investment in it for good reason, but it's not a vertical, it's not a category, it's a part of the infrastructure going forward, I think.
For sure. I completely agree with you, since I feel nowadays every company is an AI company. Who isn't creating a company that's an AI?
That dynamic, Grace, is it's natural, right? It's there's so much money over here, funds and interest in AI, that every startup kind of goes, yeah, I'm over there too, right? That's me. I'm an AI startup. And when you really look at it, and we categorize our portfolio and our applications, our portfolio is about 35% really foundational AI stuff right now. That's a lot, right? FinTech has been historically 10%. So it's a lot more, but the other 60%, might be positioning that way, but it's not really foundational to what they're doing. It's just part of, they're leveraging in some way or another.
Totally. I agree with you. Like, like there is like, founders that are like really like leaning towards like the newest like trend, as well as like, it is like a really big wave that like people will just like all get into as well. I wanna like talk about like, we had like the founder I mentioned, we had Andler on our show. So like he had like global experience of like running a global company. So so when he started like his company, it was like so he had like some local connections in each area, each region for Techstars to become a global company. When does that happen? And like at what scale that it kind of like proven that this model would also work for these different regions?
Yeah, when we started to experience that pull that I talked about earlier, and that's
Mhm.
what I think all entrepreneurs ought to be seeking is
Okay. So
market
yeah, so
bringing you there.
they want to be the local Techstar partner, basically.
Yeah, we still get that all day, all the
Mhm.
time. We get inbound on that all the time. We can't still be everywhere, and we sort of open source the model and said, hey, you could start to use this model, and people did that, and then later on we started working with those same people. So we found ways to stay connected to all of that interest. But at some point, our first international location, I think, was 2013, if I'm not mistaken, which was London. And, it's pretty familiar. Like, at least we could speak the language and all of that, more or less. And I physically moved there for a month or two with my family, like to get it going. And that was the playbook back then. Go there,
Mhm.
adapt to the local market, recruit, the mentor community, recruit the first wave of companies. The network was already growing. It was already pretty big in North America. And we just started to say, how do we extend that into Europe, right? And then we started to be pulled to, everywhere else across Europe that we
Mhm.
operate in, and Paris and Berlin and all these places, right? So um, you're trying to replicate that pull a little bit more regionally. But today, I think we're in, I don't know if it's 14, 15, 16 countries doing this activity with employees, team on the ground. That footprint feels pretty good. It feels like we have pretty good coverage. Doesn't mean we won't do more. But there's a lot of learning. Like when you go into an Asian market, or you go into, even Central American market, it's just pretty different. The laws are different. Germany's super fun. You got to sign everything live in front of a notary. It's a
Mhm.
different thing, right? You need 100% shareholder approval on things. So you have to learn about how to operationalize what you do in all these places. And that in itself is a big challenge. And so I wouldn't take being global in that way, where you're actually operating in these communities, lightly. It's a lot of work.
For sure. I like what you said, but I didn't know that in Germany you have to use the notary to like invest in a company. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you can't change a document without a lot of process, right? It's just
Wow.
the German law, and it's fine. It protects people, but it's different, right? So you have to learn how to operate in all these places.
For sure. Hi, Yuhan. Thank you for the compliment. So I wonder when it comes to like, building up like tech start, like when you're scaling it, like we just talked about globally, but like for locally, or even globally, you mentioned one of the benchmarks like in London, people speak English. Like, how do you find like so I'm sure like everywhere in the world, maybe like a sending like a request to like collab with Techstars, like how do you um go for like to pick like which location to go first, and then for when you're like open sourcing these playbooks, like have there some like is there like a time that things went wrong, it was like completely like out of control, or like I think my biggest fear if I were you, I would be like, okay, what if people just take this and scam people's money like without me noticing?
Yeah, well, they're not doing it as Techstars if they're doing that. Like, people are copying the model, right? And I
Mhm,
think generally that's good for entrepreneurs. So I'm
mhm,
cool with it. I don't need to hide what we do. I
mhm,
think other people can, replicate it and
mhm,
do these things, but it's not us doing it, right? In some cases. So
mhm,
yeah, of course things go wrong along the way, and you learn. I mean, there've been, a couple of circumstances where we didn't do a good job, maybe going into a new location, and that's just part of
mhm.
life, as part of growing and learning. But you take it and you try to get better, and you try to do a better job next time you go to that place. So it's just engaging in it. It's just learning from it, and like any company, you're going to make mistakes over time, I'm sure.
Mhm. How do you like? in the central format, like how do you kind of like run this organization like globally? Because what does your day-to-day look like as a founder and
Yeah,
CEO?
so I'm the CEO of the company. The team is very distributed, as you can imagine. We have major offices in London, Denver, and New York, but we have people again in all these different markets. So that's kind of the hubs of where we operate. You'd find lots of employees in those places, and then we have the managing directors and their teams are in the markets that we operate in. As I said, there's about 40, 50 of them in the world. And we have, like any company, a management structure, and there's general managers, regional managers that help those teams be successful. A lot of the activity, like the capital formation and the investor relationship stuff, is centralized. We do that all as Techstars from the sort of headquarters. And things like different departments that you would expect, like marketing and communications, things like that, are centrally organized and run like any business. So we have a typical looking executive team, management team, but then we have this distributed investing team around the world.
So I wonder, for each managing director, is that like a fund structure, as like people kind of like earn carries, and then there's like some sort of management fee, and like, so I wonder, like for Techstars to run, like assuming it's like just primarily from like LPs money, and then it become like an investment vehicle for the LPs, and like I wonder, for like when you guys first started like to raise funding from the limited partners, like what does that journey kind of look like for you?
Yeah. Right. So we're, fundamentally an investment business, a VC, like you have in your book there that I know Brad has been involved with. Awesome book. We're a VC firm, right? And we're investors, but we do it at the very early stage. And so, yes, we have limited partners, that come from institutions or, endowments, corporations, right, that want to invest in startups. And that's what allows us to invest downstream. And like any investor, we earn management fees and performance fees, but that's one Techstars. So we do that, that's all of us are on one team, right? So it's not that individual locations have their own individual, funds or capital. We do that all organizationally for the whole system. And then we're all partners, essentially sharing in the outcome of that. That's how it all works.
How do you kind of like, I really like that you like, like there is also like the centralized part of it. Like how do people kind of trade notes from geolocation? Like is there like a Techstar annual meeting that like
Yeah.
where all the GP came together and then be like, hey, what are you investing?
Yeah, the managing directors are a tribe, like you would expect, and they're regional sub tribes, and we get them together very regularly to share best practices, experiments that they're doing, learn from each other, and some of them are also involved in that investment committee that I described earlier, right? So there are different levels of seniority and experience on the team. They're helping each other, and they're aligned, right? The outcome is the outcome for everyone. Even though they've got activity locally, they certainly have an interest in that, but they also have interest in the whole, right? And so there's an incentive to help each other. So we're constantly learning from each other. They are the closest to our customers. They are working with them every day. We have to listen to what they want, how we can make Techstars better for founders that they're working with and talking to every day. So that's how we think of ourselves, as providing the infrastructure to help those managing directors and those accelerator programs be successful.
For sure. I like that like people are sharing like best practices together. I wonder, from like a fund perspective, since like let's say like managing director in each fund, a lot of them are like, oh, have to fundraise together. Does a 55 managing director have to all fundraise
No,
together to raise
no.
partners?
Very few of them have to do fundraising. Some of the more senior ones that are on the investment committee might be in that process a little bit, because people want to know ultimately who's responsible for the dollars that they're investing through you. But for most of them, right, the capital formation isn't one of the things they have to worry about. We worry about that for the whole company.
What I I totally feel you. I feel like I was just imagine like 55 people traveling to one place. That's a conference.
No,
So,
no.
what would be, oh, by the way, hi, Sirisha. We're totally going to talk about, AI and attack in a little bit, but I wonder when it comes to like building up Techstars, like since um, you have identified like a particular, I guess like missing part in the ecosystem early on, like many years ago. So if you are starting something like a tech start today, how would you go about it differently versus like the beginning?
Well, I mean, I think the players in the accelerator space are pretty at this point pretty well known, established.
Mhm,
They do what they do, and they're part of, as
mhm,
you said, the ecosystem. There are new models. We're investors in Pioneer Square Labs, the venture studio in Seattle. There are venture studio models that have come out now that I think are very different, also additive to the ecosystem. Um, I'm not sure I would start this today, right? But we have a position in the market that is still really valuable. We've seen our applications go up 250% in the last couple of years, right? So there's tons of interest in what we do. Now that you have dozens of unicorns and you know hundreds of billions of dollars of value has been created, it's a thing that people understand that can add value for the right segment of that market. It's not going to appeal to everyone, obviously. So, we're big supporters of all the other models that are emerging too. And, people are even going earlier, right? Where it's like formation stage, just introducing founders together. We do some of that as well. But I think it's a village, right? It takes a lot of people to service this massive, massive demand for entrepreneurship that the world has. All net new jobs come from entrepreneurship in the world. All innovation fundamentally comes from net new, from new startups. Startups change the world, and it's just an honor to be part of that ecosystem. We love working in that world.
For sure. I feel like, so congratulations on like the 250% up on the application. So I wonder, like, when it comes to like from like the big strategy perspective, how do you think about like growing Techstar? Is that like you expand into like more countries globally, or would it be more
Yeah.
of like um up like maybe up the frequency or like badge numbers? Like, how would you think about
Well,
strategically to grow the?
I think the way we think about growth is we want to be better for founders, right? And so that means we want to be better today than we were yesterday. We want to be
Mhm,
better tomorrow than we are today. It doesn't necessarily mean that bigger is
mhm,
better,
mhm,
right? Better is better, right? And so,
mhm.
we're pretty big, right? Like
Mhm,
we cover a lot of the world. We have a lot of great people in the team. We have a lot of great. I mean, we're way bigger than a typical venture capital firm, right?
mhm,
So, how do we instead think about growth as how do we make it better for every single founder every day? If you do that, the market will pull you and it will want you to be bigger.
mhm,
But it's not about just doing more and going to more places and doing more, putting more companies through a machine.
mhm,
It's about making sure every company has a great experience, every founder has a great experience. They tell their friends this is a
mhm.
great way to grow your company. And that growth will continue to happen to us like it always has, right? Because
Mhm.
I think that's what we've always been focused on. So I think over time, I mean, my vision, my belief is Techstars can be part of every startup community in the world,
Mhm.
right? We can be part of it. Does that mean we have an accelerator in every startup community in the world? Probably not. Right things for the right markets, but we do a lot more than that. We run startup weekends, we run startup weeks, we build communities with our ecosystem development lab, right? We have founder catalysts that are pre-accelerators that help people get ready for accelerators. So there's something we can do with every entrepreneurial community in the world. And my co-founder Brad wrote one of these books that's behind me actually over here,
Mhm.
called Startup Communities and the Startup Community Way. Like at this point, we're pretty much experts in building startup communities, and so we want to give that to more of the world. And doesn't mean it'll look exactly like it looks in Chicago or in New York or in San Francisco, right? But it might be the right thing for the right community at the right time. I think we have a lot of give in that way, and we're pretty excited about figuring out how to do that in more places over more time.
I wonder, so like I really like what you said about like being an expert in community. what's your advice for people who are building a quote unquote startup community in their local area? And what does that mean? Is that like 10 people meeting up like 10 times a year? Like
Well,
how do you kind of,
go get
oh
go
yeah, I
get
had
Brad's
that
book.
one. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was great.
I mean, Brad, startup communities. It's literally the Bible for how to do this. Take a long-term view,
Mhm,
right? Have activities that engage everyone up and down the stack. Let
mhm,
it be inclusive. Let people participate. Right. Create centers like heavy gravity around certain geographic areas in your region.
mhm,
There is a playbook for this. And it's interesting that a lot of the Techstars products really align with that, because that's why we were founded. We wanted to make, our little I'm here in Boulder today, right? I still live here. I plan on living here forever, right? It's 100,000 people, but it's a vibrant startup community that's like top 10 in the US and venture capital flowing into it all the time. It's a center for quantum computing for the US. It's
mhm.
got so much going on for a little place. And anywhere in the world can accomplish that if they take a long-term view, put their mind to it, and have a rhythm of these sorts of activities, like what we do. I think it is the playbook. So people should go and read that book, and they should think about how they can leverage products like Startup Weekend to make their communities better.
For sure. I wonder when, like, so in terms of like, um, having like, I don't know, like if Techstar would have competition with certain other like equivalent, or like maybe later on like competition with other VCs in deals. Like how do you think about like quote unquote like winning a competition, since like I feel like a lot of I am just coming from like emerging managers like lens, because of like there's so many people who are having their own like micro fund, and they're also
Yeah.
I feel like competing in a certain stage. um what's your thought process on like having longevity to um having success to compete with
Yeah.
some of these things?
Well, look, I'm an investor in probably 30 micro funds. You mentioned a lot of Techstars people went on, like Alexis Gold or Jenny Fielding or people like that now have their own funds. There are many of those. I'm investors in a lot of those
Mhm,
personally. I think they're great, right? Like micro funds are great. That's an obviously really important part of the ecosystem. It really comes kind of after the accelerator typically. So we view it as more connected capital to the system. Most VCs and even most seed funds look at Techstars as a source of deal flow.
mhm,
Like we're out doing the hard work to source these companies that are just
mhm,
getting started,
mhm,
help them with capital, with talent, with customers, help them tell their story, giving people a chance that wouldn't otherwise be plugged in to the venture community,
mhm,
get plugged in, right? And doing that all over the world. And so it actually, from our perspective, is super collaborative.
mhm.
And what we're not doing is getting out of our lane, right? Like we're not going in and trying to beat the Series A investor to take $10 million in the next round. We're just trying to hold our ownership in most cases, right? And we want the new investors who have the experience to grow these companies and sit on the boards to be part of the team, right? And so we have this sort of very collaborative attitude, and the fact that we start so early allows us to maintain that, because we're not competing at the later stages. Typically, we're just participating.
For sure. I want to double click on like you mentioned, like you are an investor in like 30 something seed fund.
Yeah.
So as an LP for these funds, like, how do you think about like going the generalist approach? I feel like Jenny's approach is kind of like generalist, and like there's like other people who may be focusing on one domain, and like, how do you think about like for what's your advice for like the emerging managers of the world? They are maybe trying to create like a niche, or thinking about going broad in like the generalist domain. Like since you have collaborated with many people, like how do you think like what would work in the current state of venture?
Yeah. I mean, I think the most important advice I ever
Mhm,
got as an investor, I actually got from Brad Feld many moons ago. And there's certain things that people say to you that just never leave your brain, right? And
mhm,
what Brad said is the most important thing is not what your strategy is; it's that you have a strategy and you stick to it.
mhm,
Okay, so when you think about Techstars all these years later, 17 years later,
mhm,
we have a strategy, which is this accelerator, and we're really good at it, and we stick to it, and this is the thing we do, right?
mhm,
We haven't said, oh, we have a different strategy now, right?
mhm,
It's been an accelerator all along. And so when I look at a venture fund as an LP, first thing I want to see is enough diversification, because I know there's a lot of luck in this game. And if you come to me with a pitch of you're going to invest in 20 companies, I just think you're crazy, right? I mean, no way at seed stage is that enough companies for you to get lucky. I mean, if it is, you're really, really lucky, but it's not repeatable, right? And so our experience has been more like 1 in 100, 1 in 75. That's going to be a really big company. That's what we've seen in our model. So, you know, you have to have enough investments. I care about that. And then you have to have a strategy that is clear. And saying you're going to use your network to go find, 50 interesting events, that's not a strategy. That's what everyone says. A strategy is either, it could be geographic. I'm an investor in Matchstick, for example, which is Minnesota and Colorado. That's where the GPs are, and they're totally focused on those markets. They know the people in those markets. They're sticking to that strategy, and they're getting a reputation in that area, right? So it could be geographic, could be thematic, right? It could be that you're really investing in AI, or you're really investing in healthcare or deep tech. You get good at that, and you get good at sourcing because you become an expert in that particular area. There's a lot of examples of strategies. Using your network to find deals is not one of them, right? How do you source deals? How is it different from other people? What is it that you're going deep on that you're really getting great at that differentiates you from other funds? That's what I want to know as an LP.
For sure. I really like what you said about like pick a strategy and stick to it. Also like having a really distinct pipeline, or like have some sort of like systematically play to like winning deal, or like sourcing the deals, either location or like some sort of like specialties. Like it's like really important to stick to the playbook. I want to be mindful of time. Although I have like 45 other questions for you, but I think I will just like make sure that we're on time. So I have like a quick fire round for you. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book ever, Pale Blue Dot, Carl Sagan.
Oh, I want to know what it's about. I've never heard about this book.
It's about the picture that was taken of Earth from behind Saturn, which is a little pale blue dot and a stream of dust in the universe, and that everything that you've ever known has happened on that little pale blue dot. This is the insignificance of us in the universe. Really interesting book.
Wow, crazy. Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I like to invite to a dinner party? Do I have to pick one person, or can it be a big dinner party?
It's your party.
Let's start with Barack Obama. I don't know. I just always thought it would be really fun to talk to him.
He's popular. Yeah. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
I have 3 people. My dad had a huge impact. He was an entrepreneur. Brad Feld, who I've mentioned a few times, David Brown. My co-founders have really had a big impact on me, as well as my father.
Where can we find you outside of work?
Where can you find me?
Yeah, outside of work.
Oh, outside of work.
Yeah.
On a tennis
court. We're not finding you right now, so like don't worry. Like,
on a tennis court, or on a paddle court, which is the new sport that's going to take over the world.
What is paddle court?
If you've played pickleball, it's more sport. It's more of a sport. It's a harder thing, but it's not as hard as tennis.
Oh, wow.
But it's super, super fun. And it's the most popular, most fastest growing racket sport in the world right now, faster than pickleball.
Amazing. Well, David, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was so fun to chat with you.
Thanks, Grace. Good to be here.
Let me